Where is everybody?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's bloody hot. That's where everybody is.
It is. It is. Let's see.
Oh, Dale's here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab my coffee. Give me 1 second.
All right, perfect. Hey, Dale.
Charlie, how you doing?
I am good. How was your vacation?
Oh, full, busy, very cool.
Nice. Nice. What were the highlights?
Uh, well, just learning about the Galapagos Islands. I didn't know much about that. I kept myself in the dark just so it'd be a nice surprise when I got there. But
Yeah.
they're not islands like Hawaii or the Bahamas or something like that. They're protected areas for the animals and stuff like that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, when you're on the island, you have to have a guide. You can't walk off the path. Um, you just can't do anything, but you can snorkel and swim and stuff off the beaches, you know, and do different things. So every day, so we were on a small cruise ship. It only had like 50 cabins. And every day we had island excursions and beach excursions, water excursions that we could go on. And so the Galapagos Islands are highly protected. And so it's really more of a learning experience than anything else. But what's interesting is the animals on the Galapagos Islands, they have no fear of humans at all. You're stepping over albatross birds and that are sitting there in the path, iguanas are everywhere, sea iguanas and land iguanas, the sea lions, they'll come right up to you. You got to back away. They're just curious. And because they've never been hunted or anything like that. That's the uniqueness.
That's awesome.
And the islands that we visited were not occupied because there's no water. They've tried, occupying them in the past years and stuff like that, but it didn't work because the water's too salty and all stuff like that. They tried desalinizing them back, 100 years ago, but they couldn't make it work.
Why, why, why do you think they're not afraid of people at all?
Well, they say because they've never been hunted. You're not a threat to them.
Yeah.
And it's been that way for hundreds of years. And that's where the big deal about the Galapagos, that's where Charles Darwin came up with his theory of evolution,
Gotcha.
how those animals and plants all adapted to this area that they can't leave, basically.
They're stuck there, huh?
Yeah. So that was our first 5 or 6 days. And then from there, we went to Peru and visited a lot of the Inca ruins, like Machu Picchu and different places. And the architecture of these ancient people, 600 to 800 years ago is phenomenal, of what they were able to accomplish with no tools, no
Right.
crane. It's really, really interesting.
That is. That is. That's really cool. Um, well, I love what you mentioned about uh, the animals like not being afraid of humans at all, and because they haven't been hunted. Because one of the things that I've been thinking about lately, so I met a guy who he coaches people how to use podcast for their business. So kind of like what we're doing here, like, and I picked up kind of some things with him, and one of the things that he mentions is just expert positioning, but another is just comfortability. And um one of the things that he really does that he's done really well, and I want to share this with you. He teaches people how to run a podcast, and for his expert positioning he created this short podcast to kind of tie this all together with what we're doing, and he calls it a limited series podcast is what he calls it. And it's 21 episodes, I think. Is that right? Yeah, 21 episodes. And throughout it, I'd love to share it with you guys if you guys want. One of the cool things about listening to these is I've been listening to them while I drive, because that's one of the cool things about audio only stuff that I had never thought about before I met this guy is, when we can convert our stuff to audio, people can binge and listen while they're driving or while they're washing the dishes or, like what we've done so far, like what I do, social media, video, when someone sits down at YouTube to watch a video, they're watching a video. But, when someone can listen to the audio, and I've been driving a lot lately, got some real estate stuff happening, they can just listen. And what I've discovered with this, so like one of the things that he does when he goes to speak, he said he's got like 7 slides, and each slide he just mentions a little bit, and he says, and if you want more info about that, go to episode 2 on the podcast monetization tips. He goes to the next slide, talks about it just a little bit. If you want more info, go here to number 5 on the podcast monetization tips. And his whole goal is really to get people into like those animals on the Galapagos Islands feel really, really comfortable with him, to know that if they reach out to him, he's not going to hunt them. He's not going to bite. And there's a couple of things that I've really liked that I'm trying to figure out how to pull into what we do. One is, how can we make it an audio only thing, which is really cool. 2, at the beginning of each of these, let's see, I'm gonna share this with you, see if I can share with audio, because I thought this was amazing. Let's see, I'm gonna play this one.
By listening to his show and becoming a client, I saw, wow, I'm transforming his show.
Can you hear?
Welcome to Podcast Monetization Tips. If you're an online coach, consultant, or service provider looking to learn how to leverage a podcast to grow your business, you're in the right place.
So that's one thing. He repeats that at the beginning of each of these, like who his audience is, and just let them know you're in the right place. And then it goes, I think this is the next really cool part.
Let's kick off this episode with an inspiring success story from one of my past clients that is applying the exact same methods that I'm teaching you here in this limited series podcast.
Hey, it's Leah, host of the Managing Made Simple podcast. I started working with Adam and his podcasting business accelerator program because I had a new podcast and I wanted to grow my show. So I looked on the podcast app under podcast growth or something like that. I found his show. I started listening and was instantly hooked. I loved the episode where he does the audit with folks. He gives so much value. And so I said, I got to work with this guy. And I reached out, we started the program, and immediately it became transformational, both in building a quality lead magnet, in really making clear offers that connect my audience, that really give people exactly what they need as they go on that listener journey. And basically by listening to his show and becoming a client, I saw, wow, his method works. And he is so fun to work with, so awesome. Thank you, Adam, so much. I've just loved working with you.
What's up, Pod Pals? It's your buddy Adam, and you are listening to Podcast Monetization Tips for online coaches, consultants, and service providers. If you sell your own programs, products, and services, and you are a podcaster, or you want to use a podcast to grow your brand and your business, you are in the right place with this limited series podcast.
So what he does is he tells his ideal audience, hey, you're in the right place. He's got a testimonial from one of his clients, and then he says again, hey, you're in the right place. And I talked to him last week, actually, on every show that he does, his intro has a testimonial from a customer. Now, so if you listen to number 3, there's going to be a different testimonial. Number 4, a different testimonial. Number 5, a different testimonial. Like, imagine, like, as you listen through this, what he's doing, like, I mean, where am I? I'm at number 11, and I met with him last week, and I was like, man, like, I'm ready to hire you. Like, I've had 11 people tell me that you're the best, and I've listened to what you've shared, and it's pretty helpful. And you know, I'm actually talking with him, trying to figure out like how can I take these concepts and bring it to what we're doing. And it's similar to the book that we've talked about, you know, like we've got a list of strategies that we're going to go through. And, you know, as people listen to it, non-confrontationally, right? Because if we just tell someone to just talk to us, you know, they're afraid they're going to be hunted, you know, that they're going to be dealing with sales. But here, you know, they can get really, really comfortable. And want to know, like, what do you guys think about that? What occurred to you listening through that?
I can see an opening with that as if you had a series of podcasts and you had a new lead, you could rather than send the emails that we have in buy referral only, you know, for buyer tips and seller tips, you could incorporate those into podcasts, and they're not listening to an email. And like you say, you know, for information on home inspection, go to podcast number 3. Information on financing, go to podcast number 6. You know, it keeps them engaged. I think that's a great idea. Rather than when they get done with another podcast, they don't have to think in their mind, do I want to listen to another one? Because they're already being coached to listen to the other one for that. I think it's pretty genius in a way. And now, without getting in front of those clients, and that's the hardest thing in the business, in my opinion, is getting in front of a stranger because they're afraid that they're going to be sold something. And
Sure.
here we're just giving them information. And at the end of the podcast, you know, at the end of each podcast, I suppose you could leave a call to action of some sort.
Yeah.
So it'd be fun to work on something like that to try and put something together. And, you know, every transaction has a something different that we can talk about. And from that client, if they left a short review or testimonial, and then we can talk about that person's transaction.
Right.
Specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. There's plenty to talk about.
I think that, and I would almost rather do that for me to talk into a microphone, I don't think I could do it. I would need to do an interview, say with you, Charlie, and make a podcast interview.
Yeah.
To ask questions, to engage me, to answer, to rattle on.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask me one question, I could rattle on for the next 3 minutes about that, and you wouldn't even have to step in again, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I like that.
It would be really hard for me to talk into a microphone and look at the computer like a radio announcer. I don't know that I could do that.
Right. Yeah. That's a hard skill to learn.
But I like the idea of saying, hey, go listen to podcast number 4 when I helped John and Jane Doe through their negotiations of their home inspection, and this is what I got them.
Right. You know, and
Yeah.
you've probably seen what's cool about this. When you do duo videos, we got the audio. So like we already have the material.
Yeah.
This is kind of putting it in more of an order, you know. Jerry and Jessica, like what I'm thinking, like I could imagine when you onboard an agent, like we say, hey, we've got a list of 21 episodes that we're going to do. And, you know, this is how we end up using it. And so, you know, anytime you get a referral, you know, people look at you, like now they've got that they're able to have 21 episodes that really are evergreen.
Well, you know, and you could do that evergreen with the voice synthesization of that AI product. I can't think of the name of it right now.
11
But
Labs.
If 11 Labs, yes. So if we had the text, which we're pulling up from AI as a mock thing, that would be the same short series for everybody almost. It would just be a different voice because I'm not ever gonna be talking to John Calman's clients. I'm never
Right.
gonna be talking to Jessica's clients. So we could all have the same message.
Right. Yeah. Boy, you took that to a lazy place. Automate it.
Well, that's the only way I can get it done.
Yeah. Or a duo video, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just
Uh,
we don't even have to be on the screen because then it would be a podcast. So
right. Right.
and that just would make it much easier for me. It's like talking on the phone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you could do that. Jessica, Jerry, when you saw this, what occurred to y'all?
I was kind of thinking about, I'm working on my book project, and I was thinking about the way I'm going to lay out the book is kind of like the loan application. So, employment section and then I want to do videos to walk people through that. And I was thinking if I could think back on customers that had problems with like assets or, something they tripped over in credit, and we could do a little testimonial about how I helped them with that, for the beginning of that chapter recording that I want to do. That could be really cool.
Yeah.
At least might get people to pay more attention to what I'm talking about on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be great.
I
You'd
tell
send
you,
it.
Jerry, you have a good voice. Coming over the Zoom call with your speaker, you have a good listening voice.
It's kind of funny because everybody always says you don't like what you hear of your own voice. And so it's nice to hear that somebody thinks it's good anyway.
Well, with your microphone setup, you have a deep radio announcer type soft voice.
I'd get a
Yeah.
loan from him.
Yeah.
I have time tomorrow, Jessica.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea of and one of the insights that I saw about this, so I'm like looking at like, all right, not only which by the way, we are working on posting on a couple people's pages this month, and knock on wood, our goal is in August, we're going to start taking all your referrals while you sleep stuff and posting it on your business page as well as running the ads. So
wonderful.
that's the plan. Really excited about that. And
So how do you let's say we did a dual video for just a podcast. How do we input, let's say, and then I go to my client and get a testimonial? How do we add that in there? How do we cut that in?
I mean, there's some tools that make that really easy.
Is there?
And that's something I'm kind of, I don't know how yet, like how we could do that, my favorite. Yeah. So that's something that we're trying to figure out how to do that, how to handle, because so far we don't do any editing.
Well, I'm just
So,
wondering on my own, after we've done a podcast, how do we, I would think that if we had the same magic words for a call to action, we could add that to the end of every podcast if we forgot to say it.
yeah. I don't know. I'm sure there's some software that makes it easy.
Okay.
I just don't know what it is yet. So that's a good question. We use Descript to edit. I use Riverside for my own recordings. That's a good question. But I bet we can figure out a way to do that. Jim Urban, he edits his videos. I think he's got some phone app that he's mentioned that he uses to
Right.
edit.
But what about the audio editing, throwing in some new audio,
Yeah.
at the beginning or the end?
I think it'd be pretty similar. Would be my guess, especially.
I would think so. I mean, there's recording apps out there, obviously.
Yeah.
I just don't know. I've never done it, so I just was curious.
Yeah. I know I have, but it's super nerdy and technical the ways that I've done it, and I don't even remember. I just play with tech stuff all the time. Jessica, when you listen to that, what occurred to you?
Well, I think it's very applicable to us because I think we're all salespeople that have a lot to say. And as you can see with our videos with our partners, you know, they end up being very comfortable for us. So it's only like a natural, another outlet to look into, right? It's just another thing that could be the thing, I think. I've always wanted to do podcasts, always, but never knew where to start. I don't know.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you're in this business and you're so busy, it's like, you know, you put your energy where you're familiar, sort of
Right.
thing. So you're getting us into that already. I mean, whether people like it or not, we're doing podcasts. Like you said, this is a podcast that we do.
Right. Right. We call it duo videos just so that the people you ask to be on the show or the realtors you work with don't confabulate and think it's something that it's not. We just created a new term for it so that they take it for what it really is, you know. Hey, Jim, you're muted.
Nope,
Don't-
can't hear a thing.
There you are.
Good to see you.
We are we're talking about so Dale, catch you up real quick. Dale went to the Galapagos Islands, and one of the cool things about the Galapagos Islands that he shared is that the animals there are not afraid of anyone. Like, and the reason is it's a sanctuary, and so it's never been that they're never hunted, so there's no fear at all. And I shared that I met a guy that teaches people how to run podcasts, and I'm going to share this link. He created what he calls like a limited series podcast, and each one he's got an introduction, he's got a testimonial from a client, he's got the introduction again, and then he teaches on a little thing. And each one's kind of short. You know, there's one that's longer.
An additional $6,500 in revenue into my business.
That one is 10 minutes. And what referrals while you sleep does, what duo videos do, you know, what he's doing with his podcast. We're really letting them letting our clients and referrals experience us without being hunted. So they feel comfortable coming to us when, you know, because those are the three things. One, when they're ready, we're top of mind and the only choice. Two, they feel comfortable reaching out to us. And three, we've got a system to take them to closing. And I really, I've been thinking, like, I like the idea that, like, what would happen if we created like instead of like the duo videos being kind of random, but, you know, a 20, like, hey, when we get started, here's the 21 duo videos we're going to do. And like people can binge watch them, and it actually walks through like our home selling process. So that's what we're brainstorming and asking kind of what they all thought about that.
So I want to add something to that, something that Charlie forgot to share with you, that in each one of the podcasts, he suggests that you go listen to a podcast number such and such to get more information on this topic. So it forces the people to go listen to another podcast.
Yeah, that's great.
Which I think is the genius part of it. I just
Yeah,
want to make sure you heard
I think
that.
it's really cool. I think what you guys are talking about is great because, you know, if we can put some organization to what we're doing with this, it's amazing. And this almost kind of reminds me also of, like, I've had this dream of doing a weekly like Insta live, and not just with myself, but like do it with another person. And because there's this one particular lady I know of from my church that does it every week, and she brings in people, somebody, a guest every week, and they have this conversation, and their conversations are always so great. And they're answering some of the comments that are coming in, and then she saves that live, and then she posts it, so you can rewatch it if you missed it. But if you could save those and put them in a place like you were showing us there, Charlie, that'd be great.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, one of the things that this guy mentioned is a couple of things. I told them I'm really cool guy, smart guy, loves his family. He was part of Dan Sullivan's strategic coach for about 7 years, and so we hit it off with that. He just had some smart things. Like one of the things, and so this is new. I've never shared this with you guys before, and he's kind of changing my mind a little bit about. So he says that if you want the ultimate authority and positioning, two out of every three of your videos need to be solo. 2 out of every 3 need to be solo.
Okay.
And he said it doesn't have to be long. Just, it's like a sales letter. How long does it need to be? Long enough to cover everything. And so like a lot of his are, 7 minutes, 9 minutes. Dale, when I heard this, I big gulped. I was like, ugh, like, wow, can I do that? And but it makes sense, because if we look at like his episodes here, all of these episodes are him teaching. All of these are solo. And he said the thing is, like when you're interviewing someone else, they're the expert, you're the interview. And of course with us, I mean, I've found like long as my people see me, it's good. But I also want them to like, I want their referrals to find me, and I want them to get lost in my content. Kind of like you did, Jessica, right? Like when you first, I mean, the perfect example, when you first heard of me, you saw me and you spent like an hour and a half, 2 hours watching me and Paul's videos. And so like you're literally, a compliant client. You're like, what do I need to do? I'm in.
This podcast, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
This podcast is kind of like a chapter book. He's got 21 chapters to the book, and instead of reading the book, you're listening to him talk about it, and then he's bouncing you back and forth into different chapters for that specific information that he's referring to at the time. And so it's kind of like a discombobulated book. I mean, there's no start and there's no finish, but it's still the same chapters.
Yeah. And I mean, he's got these laid out 1 to 21. So it's laid out well. So it does go through the chapters, and he can also, he's got a little workbook with it, and he's got, he'll tell you about other episodes. And I really like how, the goal is that when someone is interested in this topic, they can binge all of his information, and then they want to hire him, and throughout it, he talks about different ways that you can get in touch with him. He'll, if we were going to apply it to us, he'll talk about some clients that he did a room by room review for. He'll talk about some clients that he did a 30, 60, 90 for. He'll talk about some clients that, he did a 5, 6, 7 for. And so he weaves those stories in, And I haven't completely dissected this yet, but it seems like he's got like maybe the first 4 episodes, his only call to action is download the workbook and go through all of this. And then, I'm making this up, but the next 4 call to actions are, hey, if you've got a podcast, I've got a free podcast audit that I'll do. And then, the next 4 might be, hey, I've got this course on how to do this, or you can hire me to coach. And so he's got like, he just lets them slowly hear everything that he does, which is what we're doing with referrals while you sleep. Right. But it hasn't.
The referrals while you sleep though is monthly, whereas this can be all done in 1 day or 5 days.
Right.
It's consistent. So if you can attract their interest and keep them listening to you, it's very likely you're going to have a job, or they're going to refer you out.
Right.
Hey, listen to this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really referable too. Like one of my friends can say, hey, look, you're thinking about selling, go. My buddy's got a Sell Your Home in Nashville Tips podcast, or whatever it is. And it's really referable. And then they get to know us because, part of the whole thing, I've just seen over and over, most people need to spend about 8 hours before they feel safe with you. Kind of like the animals, in the Galapagos, it took them hundreds of years, but, most people, it takes 8 hours. That's what Jamie has noticed with his high ticket items. A lot of folks, I don't know if there's a proven thing, but this is probably right around the 8, 21 episodes. It may not be 8 hours, but it's close,
So why does he call it a limited series podcast versus just, I've got this podcast? Is it to let people know that there is an end to this?
I think so. Because if I pull this up, so the guy that does this, he actually has a podcast, a long running podcast that he releases every week. He releases 1 or 2 a week. And so he's got this, but then this one is his, really, it seems like it's his funnel. This is something that's people find all the time. And people just start listening and going through it. And from what I kind of gather and assume, like if he told me just to go to his podcast, with 485 episodes, I would listen and realize like he knows what he's doing. But like if I'm really wanting to grow my podcast, and number one, he says, start here. It's limited series. I think it does, it's almost like it invites you to binge it like you would a TV show or something. And I have been going, I've been going through this, listening, and let's see, what's the next one I'm on? I think I'm halfway through 11. I'm driving about an hour away later this afternoon, so I'll probably listen to some more. But I think psychologically it works to, give people an end in mind. And it takes, I think it takes someone through his customer journey, and they learn, like, one, if you implement it, you can do it. But really what ends up happening, like, wow, this guy gives great information. I can either do it the hard way, try to, implement this myself, or I can pay him to be my shortcut, which is what we want from our clients, right? We want our clients to say, like, I don't want the DIYer clients. I want the people that say, all right, I can see you're an expert. I need your help. I already know your strategy. Just like help me implement it.
So with these, now I have never listened to a podcast. When you're listening to these, does the next one automatically start if you're, say, on the radio station or whatever you want to call it, or do you have to click the button to go to the next one?
They usually auto start to the next one.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
And then they hold your spot, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. And So Jim, I'm looking at like, I mean, with the duo videos, we already have podcast content. And so one of the things that I'm looking at, after, what we start posting these to your pages is how can we convert these into podcasts for you? Because was something that I've never thought about before, that one of the values of podcasting is podcasts are listened to as time filler and as kind of subconscious background task. So, people do it while they're mowing the lawn. People do it while they're driving their kids to school. People do it, listen to it while they're doing the dishes. It actually becomes a part of their life, part of their routine. Like, oh, every time I do the dishes, I'm going to listen to this podcast. Like right now, mine is every time I'm driving to a showing or something, I'm going to listen to this guy. Whereas, what I found is for me, Instagram, social media, that's kind of a time filler in general. Whereas this is like occupying part of my life. Do you listen to any podcasts, Jessica?
Can't hear you.
You're muted.
Oops. That's what I
Okay.
get for making fun of Jim.
Got
I
back
know.
at you.
Yes, I do love them. And just because I'm a growing personality type, right? So I used to, when I was a part of the core coaching, I would listen to their coachings all the time. When I was working out, when I was walking. I don't listen to podcasts when my family is around. That's kind of when I do social media. But I haven't been listening to anything regularly lately. But I like to.
And yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when you were working out or doing stuff like that kind of alone, you just let that kind of run and soak it up.
Yep.
I listen to them occasionally, especially when they're referred to me. I don't ever like go to the podcast app on my phone and just look up something to listen to. Like sometimes I'll link into one if it sounds interesting. You know how sometimes they post them on social media, either in Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and I'll
Yeah.
say, "Oh, this is a pretty cool podcast." And then I'll listen to it. And if I like what I'm hearing, then I'll keep listening to it. But if I don't, then I'll just turn it off. But that's as close as I get to listening to podcasts. I'm a little bit like Dale. Like I haven't, like if there was a podcast person that I really liked, and I liked their subject matter and I was learning a lot, I might go to them regularly. But like I haven't done that like Jessica, where I've actually found one that I listen to regularly. The things that I listen to are mostly kind of just by circumstance or by referral,
Right.
Yeah. So I know that one of my daughters actually put a podcast together for a while, and she did it for about a year and then she just stopped. And I think the people that actually put podcasts together kind of come and go like that.
Yeah.
But the one that I think I've listened to the most is not officially a podcast. It's just an Instagram live on every Thursday morning. And then when you were talking about that, Charlie, about 2 out of 3 solo, she's not 2 out of 3 solo. She's probably about 1 out of 3 solo. So she'll do 1 solo and then maybe 2. The next 2, Insta live are with duos. They're like duos.
Nice.
But she does do them on her own sometimes, and they're kind of cool. Like when she does them on her own, I think it's good to mix it up, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Adam, he's really got me thinking about that and kind of seeing the value of teaching and being seen as like I'm the expert here versus interviewing someone else as the expert. Hold on a second. What's that?
How do people find podcasts? That's another thing. I wouldn't even know where to begin to find one, you know?
So, Coleman
Hi.
saying
Hi, Charlie's twin.
hi.
If I was really wanting to get, oh, hey. If I was really wanting to get into podcasts, I would literally go to the podcast app on my phone and just start listening and binging on them or something, like you go to Netflix or something, and I would just listen to them. But I just find them randomly on social media, and unless they're specifically referred to me.
Same.
They said, like one of my daughters will say, "Hey, Dad, you got to listen to this podcast," and she'll even text me the link, and then I'll listen. I'll go on the text, and then I'll just listen to it, and it's so great. Like she does find some really cool ones sometimes.
What was her podcast about?
So two of my daughters, my oldest daughter didn't really do them. She just refers them to me a lot, and then my second daughter, Alyssa, she has interest in sewing. So like she's a sewer. She likes to sew. And so she was doing a podcast on sewing and all the different methods of sewing and seamstressing and all that kind of stuff. And she had a following, like literally had a following.
I bet.
But then she just decided she's got 3 kids and it's a lot of work. So she kind of took a break for a while. So
Yeah, I saw the numbers. It's something like if you do 21 episodes, you're in the top 1% of the world.
wow.
Like 99%
What?
of people do not make it to 21 episodes.
Well, like, so is that one every 2 weeks almost? Yeah, if there's 26 weeks by weeks.
I mean, they'll do 5 or 6 and then they'll just stop.
Yeah.
And it's called pod fading. I'm learning the industry. So Adam, his suggestion. So one thing I want to recommend to you guys are already doing it. That's what the duo videos are. Like the duo videos are like
Right.
you already got it. His recommendation is if you're going to do a podcast, don't answer your question, Jessica. And I'm learning, so I'm teaching as I'm learning. But he said a lot of people, they just use podcast search engine, but the search engine's different because they might say, how to grow my podcast. They'll search that and they'll look through here and that's what they do. They search for stuff. Apparently, if you search how to grow, you get a lot of weed episodes. So what he tries to do, which let's see, it's not going to work here. He kind of views it as like organic reach. Let's see if this will work. Yeah, podcast tips or pod. So this is his. He names it, podcast monetization tips, and then who it's for online coaches, consultants, and service providers. And then he puts that in like all of his descriptions with this limited series podcast. You'll learn how to leverage a podcast so you can grow a 6-figure. And he's got all this here. And then if you look back, the next one's going to say the same thing. So a lot of people search and find it. I think for us, I think a lot of it's going to be, it's really a referral opportunity. It's something that the people that we know can refer people to. Also, I think, I know for me, like when I get referred, people usually look me up, online. So it gives them something to look me up and find. So that's the way I expect it would be, like naming it well, for the target audience. And like one of the things that I'm thinking about is I would really like to do these for y'all, Jessica and Jerry, like do a limited series podcast on how referrals while you sleep works, so that you could refer your realtors to it. And the realtors could learn, like, hey, while you're driving around looking at homes, listen to this. So that when they call me, like my magic wand scenario is when they call me, I just onboard them, like they already know all about it. And, then, be able to grow from there.
That's what we do with Amanda, right? I already have her
Right.
sold.
Yeah,
Just give him your phone.
exactly. And,
Charlie, I'm glad you mentioned this today, because at the last BRO conference, or the one before, Todd Welch had talked about that he's set up a podcast studio in his office, and I just Googled it, and I want to listen to several of his. And you guys also asked about podcasts I listen to. I have a subscription to a financial newsletter called Stansberry Investments, and they do a podcast every week, and they're just about an hour-long session. And I try to walk 2 miles every morning, and I always listen to that podcast while I'm out walking. And they've been doing it a long time. I think they're coming up on like episode 900. So it's kind of fun to go way back to the beginning, because the hosts have changed. It's really pretty cool.
I was looking up Todd Welsh's podcast. And,
I was too.
what's the link, Jerry?
It's called the Community Leader Podcast. I Googled Todd Welch, Salina, Kansas, and some of his individual stuff came up, and then the Community Leader Podcast did.
Nice.
And
Yeah,
it's under in YouTube, it seems to be under his Salina Homes.
Yeah.
Watch what steak does to your gut.
Found it.
Got it. Got it. And so I'm actually working with podcasters now to use referrals while you sleep for them, which is kind of cool. And so I'm actually doing this with the guy that runs Podcast Monetization Tips, Adam, and so we're doing some bartering, and I'm learning. And so as I learn this, I'm like, I mentioned to him, I was like, yeah, I work primarily with realtors and lenders. He's like, dude, realtors and lenders, like if they can, and then I told him what we're doing. He's like, man, you can you take that and you leverage it in this way too. Like, especially if you can get to a place where, one of his suggestions is if you can release one a week at the same time every week, you kind of get in people's rotation. You occupy, a part in their life. Like, all right, every Wednesday afternoon at 2:30, I'm going to listen. And he said, it could be 6 minutes. It could be really short, like just something. And
so
that's
Todd keeps his inside of YouTube. Is that where you'd recommend hosting the podcast that we do? Just set up a separate channel in YouTube?
I am looking, so I'm looking for a way to get it on YouTube, but also get it on as the audio on the podcast systems. Because what I've found, it's been a whole lot easier for me to binge this through audio than it is YouTube. Like on YouTube, like I can't, like I don't pay for YouTube, and so YouTube won't keep playing if my phone screen is off.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to drive with my phone screen on all the time. And so having it on the binge-worthy podcast is what I think it should be on both places. But that's where I'm trying to get it, because what I'm seeing is it's two different types of consumption. and I've never known this before. Like when I watch YouTube, I can click on stuff. I can, like we were just doing, you mentioned Todd's podcast, me and Jim, we're all looking it up. Like you can do that on YouTube. Whereas with podcast, most of the time people are, mowing the lawn or doing the dishes, like they're occupied, and this is just going.
Okay.
One of them that I'm going to have to watch, I was just kind of scrolling through, the title is What's Life in Small Town Kansas? Less Idiots Per Square Mile.
That's awesome. And to kind of go back to your question, Jessica, Adam, he recommended I listen to one specific episode where he talks about naming your podcast, and he said most of the time when he audits someone's podcast, the first thing he does is he gets them to change the name. And he said, because you really want to keyword stuff your podcast. Like his is the podcast business, growth timeline for service providers by the podcast monetization tips, or podcasting business school. Because that lets, as it grows, as people just search, it lets them also find you that way. And
Well, he must mostly, Todd West mostly is probably on YouTube, because I don't see him on the, very much of him. There's a little bit of him, but on the podcast app, like on iPhone.
oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't see him in there that much.
Yeah, it looks like he's mainly on YouTube.
He probably, because he has that studio set up, he probably has his video camera there, and he wants to get it to be a visual podcast.
Yeah.
Instead of just an audio podcast.
Yeah.
But
that makes sense. And that's my recommendation, is do it via video, because now you've got the audio and the video, right? You got both.
Yeah.
And you can take the video and you can put it on YouTube, and when you put it on Facebook, Instagram, run it as referrals while you sleep ads. And then the audio you can put on there. And the reason that he's so big on Adam is on the name is like anyone successful, he failed a lot to get here. And so he had a bunch of episodes and he couldn't get anyone to download them. So he reached out to like the #1 podcast host. It's this company called Libsyn. And he said, what do I need to do to get people to download my podcast? And they said, first thing, you probably want to change your name so people can find you. So his name is not anywhere in his podcast or description. I think for us, it might make, in real estate, I think it makes sense probably for our name to be in there, because we get referrals and people search for us. We're not trying to go international. We're pretty local.
My biggest thing is just trying to figure out topics. Like, do I talk about real estate topics? That would be like a natural one I could do for a while. And then I could talk about my passion of bicycling. I could probably put 20 episodes of bicycling together, and then I could do a podcast. If I really wanted to be bold, I could do it around my faith and my church, and I could bring in some people and do that. Those are the three that I came up with first, so I guess you kind of, you definitely want to just do something what you're passionate about.
Right. Yeah.
And then because you could like talk about stuff like that for a long time.
Yeah. And he shared, he's at episode, like 450. And he's, he said for him, he's really got, he's got a set number of things, and he'll just he'll repeat them. He learns new stuff, talks about them in a new way. And that makes, that to me, that makes a lot of sense. To have kind of just core topics that, you're, and I think that's what I love about the limited series part. Like, I've seen a lot of people have podcasts, but the whole limited series idea, like, I've got this educational funnel that if someone's interested in selling their home in Denver, Colorado, like they can start at one and I walk them through everything they need to think through. And like, they don't have to go through 200 different episodes. It's just laid out very clear to walk them through this thought process. And that really like excited me seeing that, because I've never seen anyone do that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, Charlie, that makes a ton of sense. And the other thing that you could do in that same limited podcast thing is like, special announcement, this just changed in lending, and you could fire that out and have everybody go there. And then they may see your other podcasts and hang out to listen to those too.
I love that. Yeah. Get people to consume the content. And so that's the world I've been kind of going through, thinking about, how do we make referrals while you sleep even better, easier to bring more people in. And you guys are already doing it with the duo videos. I'd love for you guys, I'd love for us to come up with, like, could we create a 21, like an outline for 21 series that Jerry, you could interview your realtors for. Jessica, you could do with you that, Jim, that, you could do. Dale, we still need to get you connected with the lender that'll do duo videos with you.
Exactly.
So I just did a chat GPT, and my prompt was top real estate limited series podcast titles and subjects. And it gave me 7 main subjects, which would be like chapters. And in each one of those, it gave 6 things to talk about within that chapter, we'll say. And I just
Yeah.
posted 3 of them or 2 of them in the chat. It won't let me do all of them because it's too large of a thing, it says. But anyways, that gives you an idea how you could break it down and get your 21 real easily.
Right.
And
So
like
great.
it says, real estate investment mastery, introduction to real estate investing. Well, that's, a 3 to 5 minute conversation. I think it's probably pretty easy. Types of real estate investment. We got residential, we got commercial, we got multifamily, and we could talk about, and once again, that's a real quick one.
Right.
Analyzing market trends, that's a little bit more involved, and you could skip some of these too. I mean, we don't have to tell them everything. We just have to let them know that we do know what we're talking about.
Yeah. 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 And I like the idea of even like having some specific ones, like have one for home sellers, have one for home buyers, maybe have one for investors. Is that something that could be done over the next 2 years? Where if I get an investment referral, that's what me and Tony Ray are doing with our investment series.
There's one, the 3rd chapter here is the first time home buyer's guide. And within that, it's got 6 episodes, we'll say. The pre-approval and credit process, budgeting your first home, choosing the right realtor, home inspections and appraisals. Then below that, it's, navigating the seller's market. Then you can talk about real estate trends and predictions, real estate myths busted, common home buying myths, investment property myths. And then it goes into the final one is luxury real estate. That's your move up buyer.
So my suggestion would think about, like the individual buyer, I think with the limited series, Like we want one specific person that it's for. Like what my suggestion would be, don't have some for a buyer, some for a seller, some for a move up, but to have one for like one specific person so that they can start at the top and just build that relationship all the way down. Because like the luxury home buyer is probably not going to start at number one that talks about a first time home buyer and get down to the bottom.
Yeah.
And what we want is we want that person to be like, oh,
Well,
Dell's the guy for me.
well, in my neck of the woods here, we have equestrian properties. We can talk about the specifics of equestrian properties. And we can, if you're thinking about buying equestrian properties, go back to episode 21 where it talks about financing and getting your ducks in a row. So you can always go back, direct them back to different podcasts. And I think that's the genius behind this, because it keeps them in your corner.
Right.
And that's the key.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love for y'all to kind of think through this, and maybe we can that's what I'm thinking through. Like, all right, how can I apply this with what you guys have already created, like with what I've got, and and it kind of goes along with the book that we're working on too. Book has chapters. It's kind of the same thing. If you got a book, you can just talk about each one. And
well, in the podcast, you can say, hey, in the book I just wrote or we just published, we're talking about this in more advanced, or if it was
Right.
a more advanced iteration of what we're talking about, more advanced strategies. And now they might want to get the book. If they request the book, you've got these people locked in.
Right.
I think the book idea is amazing for me because I've written 3 books, so I could do a podcast around each book, or
Right.
maybe a few podcasts around each book,
Yeah. A limited series for each one.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I love
So
that.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got to hop off, man. I appreciate you guys. If you need anything, please let me know.
I got one thing to share with you. So
All
while
right.
while I was on vacation, it's the best lead generation in the world. I got 2 days before vacation, I had a guy that wanted to list a duplex. I said, I just can't do it. While I was on vacation, I got 3 listing referrals. The one person that reached out to me, I've not talked to him since 2009. And I looked in my bro. I have not been sending him any postcards, any newsletters. I had his phone number and an email address. So all I can attribute it to is referrals while you sleep. Why he reached out to me, but why he would remember me since 2009. And in 2009, I said, it's best if you keep your rental house. Now he wants to sell the rental house.
That's
almost 15 years of no communication. Now I've sent him, he's on my drip campaign of buy referral only for letters from the heart and something else, but no birthdays, no nothing. And not on a consistent buyer seller drip campaign. That ended years ago. So I don't know how he found me other than this. And the email he responded to, reached out to, is a different email than I had. So I don't know if he still has the other email going, but the phone number was accurate.
That's awesome.
Well, some of my people in my clients, they opt out. So like, like for 10 or 15 years ago, they opted out and they still call me up, and I know it's because of the things they see me on social media, plus referrals while you sleep. You get those 2 combination together. It's like, they still see me, and those reminders through social media. And then the last thing I'll say is, when I'm on social media and I see them, I comment. So they go, oh, well, Jim commented, like I don't just watch their stuff. Social media to me is a way to reconnect with people on a regular basis. But you have to let them know that you're watching them by commenting. So that's my thought.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have a good day.
Thanks. See you guys.
Take it easy.
Yeah.